back to a special edition of the Bank On It podcast, as always brought to you by the Appalachian newspapers. We're joined with some special guests tonight, some of the guys that cover the area sports. We've got Cody Davis from the Hazard Herald. We've got Trevor Thacker from the Mingo Messenger, and also involved in the conversation was Steve Lemaster from the Floyd County Chronicle. And it's a big time of year. It's time for the All-Mountain team, the player and the coach of the year announcements, something that we've been looking forward to for a couple of weeks now. And I'm going to kick it over to Randy, and he can let you know who the coach of the year is.
Yeah, just starting with the coach of the year, we always start with 5 finalists. Finalists for coach of the year this year were Pikeville's Chris Mcnamee. Obviously, going to the state championship, falling a little bit short, 21-20 to Beechwood in the finals. That's obvious choice there. Jim Mcnamee from Johnson Central, again, takes his team to the Class 4A state championship. Come up a little bit short, but he still did a great job coaching this year. Perry Central's O.V. Canady. That team was put up some big numbers, had 8 wins, kind of came out of nowhere. So the job he did got recognized. Mingo Central's Josh Simmons, he gets recognized as well. His first year, the Miners had another big year offensively. And then Shelby Valley's Anthony Hampton, led Shelby Valley to 10 wins. They won a district, had a big player in Seth Johnson, 2,000 yards. So that was our finalists. We selected Chris Mcnamee and Jim Mcnamee as co-coaches of the year. Anybody want to say anything about either of the coaches?
Well, this was O.V. Cannady's first year as head coach with Perry Central, and he did pretty well. He led the team to 8 wins, which was a tie for the school's records for the most regular season wins that they've ever had. But he's been with the team for a while, too. He's been a defensive coordinator for them. He followed
Coach Larkey
to Perry Central, and we should see great things out of him. Perry Central's moving to 4A next year, so I'd like to see how he adapts to that.
Yeah. Trevor, you want to give some insight on Coach Simmons?
Well, a lot of people in Mingo County didn't give Mingo Central a very good outlook this year. Mm-hmm. A lot of people didn't think they would reach 500 this year on the season. Mm-hmm. Salmons came in after Joey Fields left to take a job at Trinity. Mm-hmm. He's now back at Martinsburg, a powerhouse, mm-hmm. AAA up in the northern Panhandle. But Salmons came in. He was familiar with the program. Mm-hmm. He's a former defensive coordinator. He came in and instilled his offense and defense. The Miners took to it, and they finished the year 8-3, falling to Point Pleasant, who they lost in a thriller first game of the season. But they played them, 3 quarters very tough. With a sophomore quarterback, mm-hmm. a lot of people have to remember they had to replace Jeremy Dillon, who was a Kennedy Award winner.
Absolutely.
But he was gone, so they had to replace him with sophomore quarterback Dillon Gold.
Yeah.
Gold, he lit the world on fire offensively, and plus they had Drew Hatfield back, who both Gold and Hatfield led the state, mm-hmm. Statistically and passing and touchdowns. Hatfield led in receivings and touchdowns. So, it's a big year for Salmons and the Miners, and it's only going to go up from there, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we'll kind of break down Shelby Valley and Coach Anthony Hampton. Known for his defense, but offense, defense both played big roles this year for Shelby Valley. They won all the games they were supposed to win, maybe a couple more that they shouldn't have. Had an excellent year. Got in the playoffs, had a good showing, won the first round game against Middlesboro. Shelby Valley, it seems like they're on the upswing in football the last few years, and Hampton's got these guys playing really well. Then you look at the co-coaches of the year. What can you say about Chris Mcnamee and Jim Mcnamee? Every year these guys are in the discussion for coach of the year. Every year, these guys have their players ready to go. Pikeville come out this last year. They made it all the way to the state semifinals, fell short to Raceland. Didn't know how they would rebound from that. Had only had 6 juniors coming back or who were going to be seniors this year. Got out some more kids, and Pikeville really, took off. Played well offensively all year. Defensively, they, the thing that we always talked about during this podcast during the playoffs was team speed.
Yeah.
You watch Pikeville play, that team speed stood out. So, Chris Mcnamee did a great job with that team offensively. Paul Sullivan's got to get some credit defensively. And then they added in a coach from East Ridge last year, Brad Allen, who worked with the offensive line. So just a great coaching staff around him. And then when you look at Johnson Central, you think run game. I mean, they rushed for probably 4,000 or 5,000 yards on the season as a team. Had Joe Jackson as a 2,000-yard rusher. Everything kind of, started on the offensive and defensive line. They had the Horn brothers, Alex and Matt. So, their numbers speak for themselves, what those two teams did. I mean, excellent job by both coaches. I think both of them are very deserving Coach of the Year. You can say one or the other could have got it by themselves, but I don't think either one of them have anything to be ashamed of, just sharing Co-Coach of the Year with each other.
Yeah, definitely a huge congratulations to both of those winners. And we want to go ahead and talk about our Player of the Year, which I know was a tough decision. A lot of really good football played in there. A lot of really good players to choose from.
Yeah.
Who ended up with the honors?
We kind of came up to a unanimous decision. Most time it's votes here and there, and they're usually split. But we came up with a unanimous decision this year. Pikeville's Connor Roberts, senior quarterback, led the Pikeville in rushing and throwing. He combined for over 3,000 total yards, throwing and rushing both. I think he was right around 50 total touchdowns. Just an excellent job by Connor Roberts this year. And those numbers, they kind of speak out. And the leadership and what he means to that team, The thing that a lot of people don't know about Connor Roberts is last year he was a first-teamer, and he only played half a season.
Yeah.
So the kid's played a year and a half. His numbers stick out. I mean, in his career, in a year and a half, he's had around 5,000 total yards, over 70-some touchdowns. So, I mean, just what he's done in that time, he's been the glue. Everything turned around for this Pikeville team when he came in. So, with all that being said, that's why he's our Player of the Year. And then you look at our finalists. Besides Connor Roberts, our other finalists were Joe Jackson, 2,000-yard rushing season at Johnson Central. We'll get into some of his stats and what he did a little bit here in a second. But then you got Perry Central's Jaden Neese. Then you got Shelby Valley's Seth Johnson. And then you got Mingo Central's Dillon Gold. Any one of these kids could have been a Player of the Year, and I don't think there would have been a lot of argument. But with all that being said and done, what Connor Roberts did kind of stuck out a little bit more than what everybody else did. Cody, if you want to kind of talk a little bit about Jaden Neese, the workhorse over at Perry Central. I mean, just kind of talk about people, let everybody know, what he did this season, what he meant to that team.
Jaden Neese was a machine this season. He pushed through. I think he had 34 touchdowns at the end of the season and thousands of yards rushing. And basically, he was just the working machine for that offense. He was a majority of their scores, and he just did great.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know he was one of their top defensive players as well. Talk about what he brought to the table on the defensive side of the ball.
Defensive side of the ball, I think he was their second leading tackler, and he had some fumbles in there that he forced, and him along with Jake Brown, they really helped the defense this season.
Yeah, and Trevor, if you want to you kind of touched on Dillon Gold a little bit, but I mean, this kid kind of came out of nowhere, had the tough task of replacing, Jeremy Dillon, who, you say that name over Mingo Central, and what he did in his career, that's tough shoes to fill. And as a sophomore with no starting experience at the high school level, came in and there wasn't a whole lot of fall off.
Well, I equate Jeremy Dillon with he's West Virginia's Tim Couch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeremy had it all. He had arm strength. He had rushing ability. He had he could do it all. Dillon had a tall order to fill.
Absolutely.
The kid has arm strength. He doesn't care to tuck the ball and run.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be a sophomore, which was impressive, with that weight on his shoulders coming in, after preseason practice, to be named a starter and come in and have to fill those shoes. Dillon also plays catcher on the baseball team, so I guess that helps out in his arm strength.
Yeah.
But I was just looking at some stats here. The most updated that we have. This was through 10 games.
So you're probably missing a couple playoff games.
Yeah, probably a couple playoff games. like I said earlier, he just lit the statistical world on fire up there. He was 162 of 229 for 2,982 yards.
Wow.
As a sophomore, which is just phenomenal. He led the state in passing yards in all classes, not just AA. He had 44 touchdowns with only 8 picks. Mm-hmm. So, those numbers are just, for a sophomore, I keep reiterating it myself, is just, phenomenal. He was averaging around 298 passing yards a game. Yeah. I just think speaks for itself. Mm-hmm. And plus Salmons has him back. So, that's
2 more years.
Yeah. So, the kid well exceeded expectations, I think, this year for what was presented to him.
Oh, yeah.
So I just think Mingo's on the, they're on the rise. I think they have a future there with him under center.
Yeah.
I really do.
And, I was talking a little bit about Seth Johnson for Shelby Valley. And, me and Wes kind of talked about it after his father, passed untimely in the playoffs. Kid stuck around, came out and put on a heck of a performance against Middlesboro.
All hard.
I mean, that right there shows you what kind of player this kid is, and what kind of heart he has. But, just looking at the statistics, over 2,000 yards a game, led the game, the state of Kentucky in all classes, rushing average a game, rushing yards per game. He led all the state. I think he was around 233, 239, something like that. So he's the type of kid who hits the whole 100 miles of running. I mean, great cutback ability, but just a kid who can do it all from the running back. He can catch passes if he has to. But, he sees a hole and he hits it, full speed. And he can break up any play at any moment, score on any given touch. So, Seth Johnson is one of those kids who, speedy back. He's came on, the last couple of years. I think in his career he's had close to 6,000 yards rushing in 3 years at Shelby Valley. Back-to-back 2,000-yard rushing seasons. So, it's kind of a no-brainer putting him in there. And when you look at, Joe Jackson, here's another kid who had 2,000 yards. Part of his story was last season in the opening game as a junior, he tears his knee up, plays a half all season. That's it. As a sophomore, he had 2,000 yards rushing, was the MVP in Johnson Central's first and only ever state championship. Doesn't get to play his junior year. Some people say he was the missing piece. Gets hurt in the semifinal against Knox Central a couple weeks ago. Goes into the state championship, has 112 yards, scores their 2 rushing touchdowns. Comes up, they give him the ball again with the trailing 14-12 to tie it up to try to send it overtime. Comes up a little bit short, but the heart and the fight in this kid, he fought for every yard he got in that state championship. And so, you can't say enough about any one of these kids. So, they're all deserving of being player of the year or, being right there in the running. You look at our running backs, 3 of them over 2,000 yards. I think we have 3 of the top 5 rushing running backs in the state rushing-wise. Just unbelievable what these kids have done.
They absolutely epitomize what mountain football is about, just the grittiness and the toughness. So we definitely want to say congratulations to all those winners.
I'm sitting here with Pikeville High School quarterback Connor Roberts. Connor, we named you our player of the year, our all-mountain player of the year. Congrats. Just kind of talk about the season you had, and now that the season's over, have you had time to reflect, or have you just went into basketball mode already?
I've thought about the game a lot lately, and that's always going to be in the back of my mind probably for the rest of my life now, just because we came up a little bit short. It was a tough loss and everything, but you just got to shake it off and just move on to the next thing. So now I got basketball season I got to look forward to.
Yeah, just kind of talk about the season you had. Just looking at the stats, I think you were over 3,100 total yards, probably around 50-some touchdowns. Sometimes you look at those numbers, you're like, man, those are video game numbers for a high school kid. Just talk about, the team around you and the players that allowed you to have that kind of season, because, there was a lot of effort on yourself, but your teammates as well. The line, has to get some credit, and your receivers.
Yeah, I had a great team. My stats were good and stuff, but there's no way they could have been anywhere they were without the athletes and the line and the defense I had and everybody. You look at my split outs and my slot receivers, sometimes I can just drop back and just throw it up there and make plays, and it's going to look good for me.
Yeah.
I mean, my line, they're constantly protecting me. I got sacked like 3 or 4 times maybe all year. That's like unheard of. And then defensively, you have guys like John Caudill and Kayden Caudill, Kyle Watkins, like all those guys like that step up to help them get a stop, and then it's my turn to go in on offense. So, I mean, it was just a group effort. Everybody just really helped him.
Yeah, just kind of talk about the state championship game. I mean, what a great game to watch, as a spectator. But playing in it, I mean, what is it like, as a player to be on that big stage and to perform that well and have the game come down to the wire and just being, a toss-up game?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great experience. Nothing's going to beat it. I played at Rupp and now Kroger Field, and I think Kroger Field was probably the better experience for me. It's unbeatable how exciting it was just to take the field and just have all those fans there. We had a great community behind us and everything. Unfortunately, like I said before, we came up short, but I mean, things like that happen. I mean, just throughout the whole game, it's kind of like we were playing behind like the whole game and stuff. Like we couldn't really get a break here or there, and it's just kind of came back and hurt us in the end. Yeah,
and just kind of talk about some of the teammates you had this year. Jackson Hensley. I mean, the year he had. Maybe that gets overshadowed because you got Christian right there beside him who has a big year. You got Kyle who has a big year. You yourself. I mean, just talk about having all these guys who are having these great years and working as one. I mean, sometimes you don't see that. Sometimes it's more like the team rallies behind one kid. But it seemed like this year Pikeville really was a collective team effort on offense and defense with just outstanding players everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, with their offense that we run a spread offense. We like to spread it out, get one-on-one coverages and stuff like that. And, I mean, with the athletes we have, it's so hard to stop everybody. Yeah. You can't hardly do that. And we can, one game you might look and Christian might have 2 touchdowns and a bunch of yards. Next game, he might not have that many touchdowns or even that many receptions. Seth Hughes steps up and has a good game. The next game, Kyle. The next game, Jackson. I mean, you never know where it's going to come from. I mean, it's just so hard to stop with the athletes that we have out there.
Yeah, just kind of talk about the job that Coach Mack and this coaching staff has done as well. I mean, it seems like, they've done a great way of putting you guys in positions to succeed. I mean, as a player, is that what that's what a player dreams of.
Yeah, I mean, Coach Mack's probably one of my favorite coaches I've ever played under. I mean, he's an unbelievable coach, but more than that, like, he's such a good motivator, and he's kind of like a second father to every player that's out there. I mean, that anytime you need something, you can just call him and he's going to be there. I mean, as far as Coach Johnson goes, he's a great offensive coordinator. He's going to be missed. I mean, Steve Johnson, he helps up there too. He's a great guy, and he's going to hopefully, I'd say he'll take over a lot of the offensive role next year. Coach Sullivan, same way. He's a great coach.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've talked about in the past that a lot of people might not realize, you didn't start really getting a whole lot of playing time at quarterback until that Belfort game and after. I mean, in a year and a half, I mean, it usually takes guys a while to get their feet under them and going, but it seems like as soon as you got in the lineup and started taking the snaps, you were off and running.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard to catch on at first. Like, the plays and stuff were pretty tough. The routes, the different meshes and all that. I mean, it's kind of hard, but I stepped in and I felt like I was athletic enough to make plays and stuff and get away with some things, like some mistakes I made and stuff like that. I felt like I could get away with just because of my athleticism and stuff. But, I mean, everybody was behind me the whole time, and it was just, I had athletes everywhere that was helping me so much.
All right. Thanks a lot, man. Appalachian Newspapers, Player of the Year, Connor Roberts.
All right, the time has come now to unveil the first team All-Mountain team. And, Randy, why don't you tell us how we have that broken down by position and how many players in each position?
Okay. We'll start with first team offense, how we break that down. We did 1 quarterback, 4 running backs, 3 receivers, a tight end spot, 5 offensive linemen, and 3 athletes. So, on the offense, we've got a good mix here. When we look at defense, what we did, we started out with 5 defensive linemen. Mm-hmm. We put out 5 linebackers and 5 DBs. We're not differentiating between safeties or corners. We're just saying if you're a defensive back and you play in the secondary, you're there. So this way we can get as many kids on each team as possible. So many kids. Our coverage area is Pike County, Floyd County, Mingo County, Perry County, and Johnson County. So, I mean, we got quite a bit of teams to get through. So, just looking at some of the highlights, and we'll look at some of the first team offense first. One of the kids that kind of sticks out to me is Drew Hatfield from Mingo Central. I mean, a lot of success from Dillon Gold has to be credited to Drew Hatfield.
Well, Drew is his favorite target. Drew also, one of the possibly the finest receiver in the state of West Virginia.
Wow.
Drew is he's been a first team All-State selection ever since his freshman year.
Yeah.
I was looking before we started the show. Some of his stats. He also led the state of West Virginia in all classes with receptions. And like I said, this is the most recent updated stats that we have through 10 games. He had 72 receptions for 1,260 yards. That was 17 and a half yards per catch.
Oh, wow.
At that point in the season, he had 19 touchdowns. So that was 126 yard average per game. Drew's one of those type kids that you throw the football, if he can get a finger on it, he's going to catch it.
Mm-hmm.
He's super quick. He runs the routes. It's just unreal to watch him go. He's gotten. I know he's visited Louisville this year. He's visited West Virginia. He's gotten some offers. I look for him to be playing on Saturday. But he's just a phenomenal wide receiver, and he's also got a younger brother who's coming up, Devin, who's a freshman this year, who made his own way this season. But Drew's he's a 1 in a million, wide receiver for Mingo Central. He has, since the football season has ended, he has transferred to Logan. So we'll see how that pans out later on. But yeah, he's well worthy of the first team. Lit the statistical categories up for Mingo Central this year.
And I would imagine that he made Dillon Gold's job a little bit easier, having all that experience under his belt, being on those championship teams, on those semifinal teams. I mean, just talk about their chemistry between quarterback and wide receiver, and kind of the things that you observed between the two of them.
Well, he did. When I spoke to Drew, before the season started, during the previews, he told me that he had went to Dillon, and he had told him, you're not Jeremy Dillon, but if you find me, throw me the football, and I'll catch it. And Drew, they had worked after practice. They would stay late and work on routes and things of that nature. He told me that Dillon threw the ball just as hard as Jeremy, but he just had to. Dillon was in a situation where he had never played varsity quarterback, so that's what his stats and just what he was accomplished this year just made it even more, phenomenal. That he settled down and he had Drew there, but Drew did. He made his job a lot easier, knowing that he had that all-state wide receiver there to throw to. And like I said, if he could get it close to him, Drew would catch it. And he did. They formed a relationship really quick, and it paid off. Like I said, most people didn't give Mingo Central a chance, and in Salmon's first year, and they came out and proved a lot of people wrong. Drew's just one of those kids that I expect big things out of him. I really do.
Yeah, and just looking at the wide receivers, as we're looking there, Cody kind of give everybody what Hazard's Isaiah Stupert done. I mean, had a big year. He was one of those two-way players, but kind of stuck out as a wide receiver as well.
Isaiah Stupert, he was definitely a two-way player. I've seen him make some phenomenal catches this season. There's one catch that sticks out to me in my mind in particular. We ran a picture of it a couple of times where he's just an inch or two away from going into the out of bounds, and he's just caught the ball halfway in there, and he has a lot of receiving yards. He has a lot of tackles. He's just been a great asset for the Hazard Bulldogs all around.
Yeah, and we didn't mention the running backs and the quarterback, but if they were a finalist for Player of the Year, we automatically put them into the first team. So we'll skip talking about some of those other guys, and we'll look at right now at Jackson Hensley from Pikeville. He's our other receiver for first team. Hensley is just a big playmaker, speed. He was Pikeville's top receiver. Had a big impact in that Class A state championship. 2 touchdown catches. He gets hurt. A lot of people think, he doesn't go down that state championship. maybe Christian Bilder's not double teamed at the end. Maybe Pikeville wins that game if they have that option. He's that type of impact player where he can affect the game whether he's on the field or not. We could have put him on first team defense too as a cornerback, but I mean, the effect and impact he has on the game offensively is kind of what stood out to me all season. And, they would use him in different ways. They would put him in some sweeps sometimes. They would line him up as a running back. So the versatility, the athleticism, the speed, Jackson Hensley's one of those other kids who, just like Drew Hatfield, could have made an argument for being one of those finals for Player of the Year. I mean, he's that type of player. Just a great season from Jackson Hensley for Pikeville, and he's going to round out that the wide receiver spot for us on first team.
Yeah, passing touchdown as well.
Yeah, and he's thrown passing touchdowns. I mean, the kid can do a little bit of everything on the field. That Pikeville team, versatility is one of the keys for that team, and it's players like Jackson Hensley's why, And just backing up, we didn't mention our other first-team running back is Belfry's Isaac Dixon, sophomore, speedy back. He shared that backfield with Brent Coleman and Ben Bentley and Avery Browning, Kevin Browning. Depending on what week you want to see online, they might call him Kevin on the PA. They might call him Avery. So, just a talented Belfry backfield. He's our other running back. He's the fourth running back. And we got one tight end this year. Floyd Central's Brady Kahn. He was injured most of the year, but, the impact he had on the game early on. That offense changed a lot when Brady Kahn went down. Floyd Central struggled after he got injured, but I think his impact was well enough to warrant him a first-team selection at the tight end spot. Now we'll look at our offensive linemen. It starts off with Belfry's Wolford. You got Johnson Central's Patrick, Pikeville's Braden Hunter, Belfry's Rash, and Shelby Valley's Blackburn. Some big guys up front and some very talented players. A lot of this mountain football, everything starts up front, and
that's where it all starts.
Looking at these guys, if you have a line like that, no wonder you got so many 2,000-yard rushers up here. And then we selected 3 athletes for the first team. Belfry's Avery Browning was one of those kids. Johnson Central's Riley Priest and Hazard's Reese Fletcher. Browning and Priest, they play both sides of the ball a lot. Both of them could do a lot on the field. They could run, they could throw. Priest returned punts. He had several interceptions. Just an impact player. And Cody, just tell people some of the things that Reese Fletcher did. I know he's a two-way player as well.
Yeah, he's a two-way player, definitely. He's one of those kids you cannot keep him down. It seems like he faced issue after issue with injury after injury, but he was just right back at it. He did not have any quit in him, and he actually ended up being one of their lead tacklers, if not their lead tackler, and he was one of their top rushers for the ball as well. Just an overall great all-around athlete.
All right, now it's time to start talking about some of the guys on the defensive side of the football. First team All-Mountain defense. Who you got, Randy?
And when it starts with the defensive line, everything starts with Johnson Central's Horn brothers, Alex and Matt Horn. Not two better players in the state on the defensive line. You talk about people getting after it. Those two kids get after it. Just the toughness, quickness, all that stuff. They bring everything to the table. Then you look down at Pikeville's Jesse Sparks, another quick guy off the line. Plays, he impacts the game so much up front, just disrupting everything. Pikeville only plays a 3-man front most of the time on defense. You can't tell that with Jesse Sparks up front. The kid's good. And then we got Noah Canady from Perry Central. Cody, tell us a little bit about Noah.
Well, Noah is the son of the head coach, Obi Canady, and Noah is actually one of the top leading defensive sackers in the state right now. Him, along with Jake Brown and Jaden Neese, have been the top 3 players that really shaped the Commodores' defense. So he's got a couple more years under his belt to go, so hopefully he just continues to improve, and they'll be able to rely on him in the future.
Yeah, and, rounding everything out up front is Pike Central's Tanner Hunt. Pike Central, they get after the ball as well. He really led the charge up front for the Hawks. Moving on to the linebackers, we got a great group of linebackers here, and everything starts with Pikeville's John Collum, one of the top players in the state at the linebacker position. Really gets after it. It seemed like anytime there was a tackle to be made, he was the first guy to the ball just about every time. Paintsville's Christian Keaton, and I mean that kid, he had a ton of tackles this year. I think he had 130 plus tackles. And then right down the road, Johnson Central's Devin Johnson, another big time linebacker right there. And then Perry Central's Jake Brown. I mean, his stats are unbelievable. Cody, if you want to go through a little bit of his stats and let people know that this type of season he had.
Jake Brown is what happens when you create a player on a Madden football game, and he just has insane stats, insane records. I think he came up to nearly 200 tackles by the end of the season. Absolutely nuts. And he was also the second leading sacker on the defense. So that kid, wherever he decides to play college at, that's going to be a very lucky school to be able to get their hands on that kind of quality of a defensive player.
Yeah, and it seems like you can't talk about linebackers without talking about Belfry. And rounding up the first team linebacking core is Belfry's Austin Fields. He's one of those guys who can do a little bit of everything on the defense. He's one of those leaders. He's a glue guy. He's right in on everything. So very deserving. I mean, the linebacker spot this year was a tough call. So many talented players, but I mean, we try to get the best of the best, and these guys, they can play anywhere at that linebacker spot. We'll move on now to the defensive backfield, and we're going to start with Pikeville's Christian Beltry. The kid led Class A in interceptions, and I think he had 7 interceptions on the season. Great player on offense, but he was just as good, if not better, on defense. And then we'll stay with Pikeville in the secondary with Kyle Watkins, one of the biggest hitters out of the secondary there was. Anywhere you could see Kyle, could come up with an interception on any play, take one to the house. Just another great player for Pikeville back there this year. And then Belfry's Brent Coleman had a big breakout season this year. Young kid, still got a couple more years left at Belfry. Big impact on offense, big impact on defense. Could have put him in either spot, but we decided the impact that he had on defense kind of stood out, so we put him there. And then you look at Shelby Valley's Dalton Mead, another one of these kids who could play anywhere on the field. Probably around 150 tackles on the year. Several sacks, a couple of interceptions. Another do-it-all type player. And then rounding out the defensive backfield is Johnson Central's Dillon Preston. Another big impact player there. That kind of wraps up the defense. Any thoughts on the defensive players, Wes?
No, just want to say a big congratulations to all of the guys who ended up on the first team all-mountain team on offense and defense. And some of these guys, obviously, are names we're going to see probably again next year.
Oh, yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
All right. And now it's time to unveil the second team all-mountain team. Some of these guys, I think we've talked before, are probably interchangeable with the first team and the second team, but lots of players talk about who we got at quarterback.
Quarterback, Hazard's Bailey Blair. I mean, kid is a dual threat back, and we'll let Cody kind of talk a little bit about why he was selected as a second team quarterback.
Bailey Blair, he completed 107 out of 177 passes this season. He did pretty good. Overall, he had 1,752 yards, 14 touchdowns, but threw 5 picks. But Bailey Blair, overall, pretty good quarterback, and I think he made a great selection for our second team.
Yeah, and sticking with Hazard, I mean, our first running back is Hazard Skylar Pelfrey. Just kind of talk about the season he had.
Skylar Pelfrey had a phenomenal season. I expected him to have a good season from the start, but I didn't expect it to go as great as it did. I think he ended with 145 rushes for over 1,000 yards, and that's just phenomenal. Ended with 13 touchdowns. He had an injury, set out a couple games, so if you take that into account for his stats, I think he's just a great running back.
And coming into the season, one of the question marks about Hazard was who was going to fill in that running back spot. I mean, just talk about, how after he got his footing, the comfort level he got and how this offense kind of took off once he got that role, settled down.
Yeah, once he got comfortable with the role, he and Bailey Blair made an incredible team. The offensive line worked to make the holes, and they were just able to push forward over and over again, and he was able to make the plays when they were needed.
Yeah, and sticking to the running backs for his second team, Floyd Central's Josh Whitaker was selected. Whitaker had a big season for the Jaguars. That team, they were hitting all cylinders early on. After the injury to Brady Kahn, things kind of slowed down. The offense is kind of focused a little bit more about Whitaker, but he still ended the season with about 1,000 yards rushing. A great year. And then our third selection for running back is Mingo Central's Dougie Dylan. Dougie was a first-year starter at the running back. Saw a little bit of action last year, but Trevor, give us a little bit more info on Dougie Dylan and the season he had.
Well, Dougie, he like you said, he played last year. He left midway through the season due to personal reasons. He was back for Coach Salmons this year. Mingo Central had Dawson Eli, the senior last year. He was also a Canady Award candidate along with Dillon last season. So this was his first varsity starting job. So he came back this season, and I reiterate, as the most updated stats we have on Mingo Central at the time, through 10 games, he made 107 rushing attempts for 739 yards. So he was averaging 6.9 yards per carry for 5 touchdowns for 73.9 yards per game. Dougie was the type of back that he was a north-south runner. He was not one of these east-west guys. He tried to find the end zone. He was going to find you, 4 or 5 yards every time he touched the ball. He liked to lower his shoulder. He didn't mind contact at all. And Dillon will be back for Mingo Central. So, the backfield is pretty well set for Mingo. I think they'll do well next season, I think.
Yeah, and just kind of talk about, this spread offense, his role. Is he the type of back that could get out in the space, catch a pass, or just find the lanes when he got the running room? I mean,
well, he did. Goad, the quarterback Goad, they do like to open it up and throw the football. But Dillon came out of the backfield numerous times last season. He could roll out, catch a pass, and he does. He does really good out in the flat. He does. I mean, he can catch it. He's got great hands, pretty good speed. He can run. They utilized him over the middle quite a bit last year. Some screen passes, things of that nature, and he picked up big yardage. So, Dillon is, like I said, he's one of those north-south runners. He'll get you yardage. But yeah, Goad, he seemed to, he would find him, and I think they'll utilize him more next year. I think now that Hatfield is gone, so they'll have to look more to Dougie Dylan.
Okay, and then our final running back on the second team is Phelps' Dominic Francis. Francis is just a sophomore. Good 1-2 punch with him and Zach Ramey over there. Either one of those kids could have been selected second team running back. We gave the nod slightly to Francis because he was their leading rusher. He's a playmaker. He has the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. He can break it at any time to go to the end zone. Great job over there David Jones did with that team this year. And, Dominic Francis is one of these names that people can expect to watch and have big things coming his way in the next couple of years. Moving on to the running back second team, we had Pike Central's Austin Morrow. He's another one of those kids, he was very dangerous in the red zone, would come up with some spectacular catches. Pike Central, they don't air out the ball a whole lot, but when they do pass it, Morrow was always the favorite target in the receiving game, so very well deserving to him. Pikeville Seth Pugh's another kid that we selected second team wide receiver. Pugh's one of these kids, so he could argue that he deserved to be a first teamer. He can make plays happen. He can score on any time he touches it. I think he was their third leading receiver behind Billiter and Jackson Hensley. Plays both ways. I mean, just a very talented kid. Speed, athleticism, size. He has it all for a wide receiver. And then our final wide receiver selection is Floyd Central's Ethan Smith Mills. Again, good size, good hands. Smith Mills is one of these guys that, one-on-one coverage. A lot of kids around here just can't handle him one-on-one. So that's kind of why he was there. And our second team tight end is East Ridge's Cameron Hess. Hess could have been a linebacker selection as well, second team, first team. I mean, he plays well. Both a big, strong kid, athletic. You'll be hearing his name coming up this basketball season as well. A young kid. I think he was a junior this year. So, his size made it tough for opposing linebackers to match up with him. And once he got him out in space, he could make the catches. Moving on to the offensive line. I mean, these are the big guys who do all the work up front. They don't have stats that you can necessarily just talk about, but everything starts up front for all these offenses. And the first name we're going to kick off is Johnson Central's Andrew Clifton. Then we're going back to Phelps, and we're going to give David Blackburn the nod. And then Tug Valley's Jared Webb, and then Hazard's Mason Collins, and Mackenzie Caudill for Hazard as well. So if you want to talk a little bit about Jared Webb and the job he did up there at Tug Valley, Trevor, just give us a little insight on some of the things he did well.
Well, Jared Webb's a big kid, 6'7", 320 pounds, which is, rare for this area, for an offensive lineman. Tug Valley, although they had, they made the playoffs last year, they had a down year this year, but they also had a sophomore quarterback like Mingo Central, Tyler Chaffins. Webb, with his size, he's very agile and quick for his size. Actually, he protected Chaffins. He gave Chaffins, time to actually look over his receivers. He gave him time to throw the football. And even though, like I said, Tug had a down year for them, they've had success in the Tony Kluski era over there. I think they've made the playoffs 4 out of the 6 years. Don't take me to the bank, as our podcast is named on those numbers, but it's in that neighborhood. Kluski's had success over there, but big guys like that, Jared Webb, they pushed the defensive line off the ball. He gave Chaffins the opportunity to be successful in his first year at quarterback for Tug Valley.
So is Webb a senior?
I'm thinking that he is.
Yeah.
I don't have that on me right.
So maybe somebody else we could see on Saturday.
Very possible.
With that size,
he's very possible he could be. Like I said, it's a rare find around the mountains. 6'7", 320, just a monster kid.
Yeah, and then Cody, if you want to talk about the couple of linemen up there for Hazard and what they bring to the table and why that Hazard front is so good.
These guys, they've just been pushing forward all season long, and they're the reason that the running backs and the wide receivers and everyone is able to make plays. They've been great at holding people back. They've been great at making holes, and just overall solid offensive line players.
All right, and then we selected 3 athletes as well for the second team, and we'll kick it off with Phelps's Garrett Clevenger, quarterback. Clevenger could run the ball, throw the ball. Had a really good senior year this year for the Hornets. Really good leader back there for them. He played defense as well. Clevenger had a great year for Phelps. Then we look at Belfry's Ben Bentley, a kid you just put him on the field. Speed, size, he strides out well when he gets an open speed. He's one of those. A lot of people might know his brother playing for Louisville. Just athletic stock right there for Ben Bentley's. And I think he's only a sophomore as well. So a bright future ahead right there for Philip Haywood. With Ben Bentley and Isaac Dixon and Brent Coleman. I mean, just names right there that, the next 2 or 3 years are going to give people nightmares. And then our final athlete is Mingo Central's Devin Hatfield. And Trevor, we talked about his brother a little bit. Just talk about some of the things that Devin brings to the table. Very similar to Drew, or does he get a lot of his openings because people are paying so much attention to Drew?
Well, Devin it will make a name for himself in his own right. Devin actually taller than Drew. I don't know if he's quite as quick as Drew, but the kid has great hands, speed. He's like his brother in the fact of you throw the ball around him, he'll catch it.
Mm-hmm.
Only a freshman. I was looking at the stats of him here. I pulled up through 10 games. He had 45 receptions for 772 yards. I'm pretty sure he did go over 800 yards on the season, including the playoffs. He was averaging, Drew was averaging 17.5 yards per catch. Devin was averaging 17.2 yards per catch.
Oh, wow.
With 7 touchdowns, 77.2 yards per game. Like I said, Devin is more, he's longer.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, that was the case too. A lot of people, Drew was the focus of opposing teams. That they keyed on Drew, which left him open some. But Devin is one of these explosive kids. Like I said, he's going to make a name for himself in his own right. And Dillon Goad, the quarterback. If Drew wasn't open on his route, that was most of the time that was his second option. So he's going to be an explosive player. Like I said, just a freshman.
Yep.
So expect big things out of this kid too.
All right.
Now it's time to unveil the second team all defense, and same as the first team. I think you had a lot of guys who could be interchangeable, could have probably been on the first team, but we only have so many spots. So who we got on second team all defense?
Okay, we'll start off with the defensive line. We'll just go through them real quick. Belfry's Grayson Cook. The kid is athletic, quick, gets off the end really well. Look at Shelby Valley's Braden Keithley. I think he was second or third in tackles. Had 4 or 5 sacks for the Wildcats. A big year. A name that kind of came out of nowhere for Shelby Valley. A lot of people didn't have him on the radar. And then you look at Hazard's Parker Holbrook. He's our third defensive lineman we selected. Cody, what's some of the things that Parker does well?
Parker ended the season with 43 tackles and 2 sacks. He was the team's second leading sacker. Just an overall good defensive player. And look for him to make some more big moves in the future.
Yeah, and then we get back to Phelps, and we got David Blackburn on the defensive line. His brother was on the offensive line. So those 2 kids had big years for Phelps. Did a real good job over there for David Jones. And then Trevor will round it out with Mingo Central's Ryan DeBoard. Just give us a little rundown on what Ryan did on defensively.
Well, Ryan, he finished, like I said, through 10 games. Ryan had 27 total tackles. He had 20 solos. He had 1 sack on the year, 3.5 tackles for loss. One thing that stuck in my mind was the big boy. Ryan's a pretty good-sized guy. He gets to the backfield, really. He gets to the backfield, pressures the quarterback. The big guy, he forced a fumble earlier in the season. He recovered 2, but I remember him taking 1 to the house. The big guy. I watched this kid. He's a good-sized guy. Returned it 89 yards for his
Oh, yeah.
So you always like to see the big hog, running down the field. And he was just exasperated. He was exhausted once he got to the end zone. But, man, there was nobody catching him. He was not going down. So, he just provides that spark. He pushes those offensive linemen off the ball. So, well-deserving of second-team defense.
Yeah, now we'll move on to the linebackers. And, we've mentioned a couple of powerful defensive players on the first team. We're going to mention some more on the second team. I mean, we started off with Kayden Caudill. He was second in the team in tackles. One of those linebackers that always around the ball. And then the guy, our next selection for second team linebacker is this teammate, Connor Wright, another kid right there. This linebacking core for Pikeville really just got to the ball. That speed was there. So we had to get both of those kids in there in the mix. And then Johnson Central, Hunter McLeod, the kid could cover. He could drop back in pass coverage, come up with some interceptions, get to the quarterback, just an all-around player. And then you got to have a Belfry linebacker again, Justin Barker, second leading tackler on the team. Kid was all over the field for the Pirates. And then Trevor will kick to you again and talk about Tug Valley's Parker Brewer, a big boy who ran the ball well as a fullback, but I think his biggest impact on the field was linebacker spot.
Well, Parker did. He's a big guy. He's a load once he gets going. He's like a train. It's hard to stop him. But yeah, Parker, he played middle linebacker. He played different linebacker spots. Had a great eye for getting, for the runner. He just, like I said, he's just such a big kid. Once he eyes you, he's going to get you. Very agile, quick for his size. And he was a big key to that Tug Valley defense this season.
Yeah, and then we're moving on to the defensive backfield. I mean, these kids are talented as well. A lot of these kids got arguments for first team as well. But, we'll just look at some of these kids. And Shelby Valley's Cameron Works was the defensive back that we started everything off with. Had good cover skills. First year coming out playing football. Really known as a basketball player, athleticism, return punts, did a little bit of everything. As the season grew on, he got better and better. So we had to reward Cameron Works for the big season he had. When you look at Johnson Central, Evan Atkins, as good as there is around anywhere. The kid he's an impact player. You can put him one-on-one in a receiver and feel comfortable with him making a play and breaking up passes. Then you look at Paintsville's John Walker Phelps, another one of these kids that can do it all. You could put him at, maybe receiver, maybe running back, maybe, wherever else on the field. He does a little bit of everything. So, but we thought his efforts were good enough to put him on the second team in the defensive backfield. And then Belfry again, you think of Belfry, you think of defense, and to have the guy in the back there breaking up those passes when teams want to pass on Belfry. Isaiah Birchfield did a great job for the Pirates. Another young guy finding his way, and he's got a bright future ahead of himself there. And then over at Phelps, Seth Elkins. That defensive backfield was did pretty well all year with Turnmeyer and Clevenger back there. But Seth Elkins, everything he was kind of their main pass stopper back there. So that kind of wraps up our All Mountain second team.
Now it's time for the 2018 Appalachian Newspapers All Mountain Team honorable mentions.
Yeah, we'll just go through and look at some of the players here. We'll have the whole list so you can see it here on the screen. But a couple of the kids that kind of stand out. We'll start with Paintsville, the Allens. Some of these kids would have arguments for first or second team, but Chris Allen, James Allen, Jalen Allen, those names right there alone, any of those kids could be first, second team. Very talented players. A kid like Seth Williams at Paintsville, who came on at the end of the season, became their top running back. Probably played 5 games all season, so he makes the honorable mention list. So very talented group of players there at Hazard, and then at Paintsville, and then you move on to Hazard. Look at some of those names: Andy Baker, Trey John Campbell, and Kyle Johnson. A lot of people was going to have them on a first or second team at the end of the year. We've got such a wide range of players. Some kids are not going to make it on the first or second teams. There are just so many players. We can't get everybody on the first and second teams.
Doesn't mean they didn't have a great year.
Exactly, and doesn't mean they're not good players. These are some outstanding players.
Right.
Look at Johnson Central, Bryce Tackett, Ryan Sarton Sloan, Noel Blankenship. Some of those kids. A kid at Peaburg that was a first teamer last year, and Ethan Barney, he's honorable mention this year. So there's talent everywhere. Perry Central, a freshman receiver named Cade Miller, had an outstanding year, had some big defensive plays. Jordan Feltner, look at his numbers on defense. Then you look at Tug Valley, you got quarterback Jacob Chaffins, had an outstanding year. Mingo Central, they had some big names there with Billy Mincham making the second team, and Belfry, Kyle Webb, Jacob Baisden. Some really good players here on this second team. And when you go to East Ridge, C.J. Branham's having a real good year. He, gets injured, only plays a handful of games. It's still good enough effort to make a honorable mention. Kane Taylor led the Warriors in rushing. He's there. Chase Caudill did a little bit of everything, Reese Ridge. Then you look at Pike Central, their quarterback Tyler Hunt, who, impressed me all year as one of the better quarterbacks in the area. He's an honorable mention. Then you look at Shelby Valley, they got a kid like Clay Morgan, who's just one of those senior leaders. Again, very versatile, do it all. Do a little bit of everything. He makes. And then you go to Phelps, Brandon Turnmeyer, Zach Ramey, one of the top linebackers and running backs around, led Phelps in tackles, and there's just no room on the first or second team for a player like that who's very deserving to be on either team. So, and then you look at Pikeville, they got so much talent. You can make an argument that all these kids on the state championship semifinal team could be on first or second team. So I mean, that not everybody's going to make the first or second team, but there's no shame in being an honorable mention. Outstanding players and very talented players as well.
Yeah, so definitely a big congratulations again to all of the first and second team All-Mountain team members. A big congratulations, Coach of the Year, Co-Coach of the Year, Mcnamee and Mcnamee, and the Player of the Year, Connor Roberts. Congratulations to all the winners this year. Definitely well-deserved. And then moving on to volleyball.
Yeah.
Lots of names there as well.
Yeah, what we did with volleyball, we just came up with the top 15 players. We did a Coach of the Year and a Player of the Year. Coach of the Year and Player of the Year, same place in Paintsville. Megan Taylor, Signsman Marshall, just a dominating force on a volleyball court. That's a no-doubter for Player of the Year, and then Coach Don Kenner, winning back-to-back region championships at Paintsville. So those two are going to get recognized, and then you just look at some of the names that for the volleyball, Pikeville's Kaylee Wells, Coach Wells' daughter, had an outstanding sophomore season for Pikeville. And then Lindsay Miller at Belfry, Alyssa Stanley at Belfry, Tyler Fields at Shelby Valley. I mean, just a lot of talented players here. I mean, Paintsville had Jordan McConley as well, and Shelby Hatfield. So, I mean, Floyd Central had several really talented players as well. So, I mean, you got a lot of talent on this top 15, and we just try to pick the best of the best and try to get as many kids on there as possible.
Yeah, lots of talent to choose from. Broad coverage area that just keeps expanding for the Appalachian newspaper. So that means more talent, more players. And then moving on to girls soccer, we got just as much, the same thing. Lots of talent.
We try to kick it off with Player of the Year and Coach of the Year, and they both come from Prestonsburg. Coach Paul Burchett was named the Coach of the Year in girls soccer, and his daughter Elizabeth Burchett's Player of the Year. I mean, Prestonsburg had an excellent season. Tons of talent on that team everywhere. I mean, a lot of talented volleyball players in the region with Pikeville having Sydney Williamson make it. You look at Johnson Central with Lauren Johnson, one of the top players in the region. And then Petersburg's Michaela Ousley and Julian Kidd. I mean, really talented players everywhere. And then, if you want to move on to boys soccer, I mean, Cameron King from Perry Central, we named him Player of the Year, and Brad Burchett at Prestonsburg, we named him Coach of the Year. So, Perry Central and Prestonsburg, they each won a region. Perry Central in the 14th, of course, and Petersburg over here in the 15th. So, I mean, excellent year. Look at some of these names for Hazard. You'll see a name like Kyle Johnson, who plays several sports. You'll see his name in football, and then you look over here and he's playing soccer as well. And the kids, he also plays baseball during baseball season. So I mean, a lot of familiar names. Just like Jake Headley at Johnson Central, he's their kicker on the football team, and he makes a all mountain team on soccer as well. So want to wrap things up right here?
Yeah, like I said, we definitely want to congratulate everybody on an excellent season. Congratulations to all the members of the all mountain team, first, second, and honorable mention. And then we definitely want to thank Cody Davis from the Hazard Herald, Trevor Thacker from the Mingo Messenger, and Steve LeMaster from the Floyd County Chronicle for sitting in, helping put these teams together. Lots of well-deserving young athletes in the area, and congratulations to each and every one of them.
All right.